Hello everyone, my name is Kristie Lane-Anderson. I'm a research specialist with the Land Stewardship and Ecology team here at Longwood Gardens. And today I'm going to talk to you about our stewardship science work. If you've had the chance to visit Longwood in person, you'll know that we have amazing displays of horticultural art and science in the formal gardens. What you may not know is that these formal gardens only make up about a third of all of Longwood itself. Longwood Gardens is also home to nearly 750 acres of natural areas, encompassing a wide diversity of ecosystems, including forests, meadows, streams and wetlands, reforestation areas, green infrastructure, and agriculture. These natural areas are overseen by the Land Stewardship and Ecology team, where our aim is to integrate ecological science and adaptive land management for beauty and biodiversity. This team was begun by Dr. Leah Johnson in 2019, bringing an integration of ecological research and land stewardship to Longwood's natural areas. In many ways, Longwood's natural areas are a microcosm of the Mid-Atlantic. The land management challenges we face are shared throughout the region, including urbanization, invasive species, and climate change. That is why Longwood's natural areas are a living laboratory for ecological science. Science is central to our land stewardship approach, and land stewardship is central to our scientific work. We engage in long-term ecological research to understand how ecosystems respond both to our work and to broader environmental changes. We also test innovative land stewardship practices that are relevant to organizations of different sizes, evaluating costs, benefits, and effectiveness of different techniques. We're interested in how changes affect the lives of both butterflies and oak trees, so we need to think in both kinds of ecosystem time. All in all, we are working to answer the question, how can we take today's living biodiversity with us into the future? The first step to this process is to set an ecological baseline. I like to think of our work as layers on a landscape. We consider social values, aesthetic experiences, biodiversity, watershed health, agriculture and infrastructure, as well as opportunities for scientific inquiry. And this landscape, in all its complexity, is changing over time. To understand tomorrow, we first need to understand today. Long-term ecological research allows us to take a long-range view of the landscape. In our ecological baseline study, we're making scientific observations about the current state of our habitats so that we can return to those same places again and again over time to observe how they've changed. By taking this initial view, we can watch changes over time in response to our restoration efforts, and we can better understand the impacts of broader ecological events. One of the tools we use for this is GIS, or Geographic Information Systems. Basically, we can think of this as fancy mapping. We can create multiple layers on a map and enrich those layers with data and information. Then we can examine and analyze this information in a variety of ways. Our first step to an ecological baseline was to build a map. We first pulled together current and historic aerial photos, existing maps, both digital and hand-drawn, and our knowledge of the landscape to make a preliminary map of our plant communities. Using this preliminary map as a guide, we use GIS tools alongside expert botanists to walk every corner of the landscape and finalize our plant community boundaries based on in-the-field conditions. We then began setting up permanent plots in each of these to make detailed observations about the plant community structure, composition, and diversity. We've identified and mapped 207 different terrestrial plant communities, and we've just completed permanent plot sampling this summer. Through all of this effort, we've created a rich and detailed picture of our landscape, which informs our work as land stewards. So let's take a look at how we integrate science and land management. Our natural lands are diverse and dynamic, and care for the land requires a complex dance of management: invasive species removal, disturbance revegetation, reforestation, diversity plantings, and more. It's a lot to keep track of and to wrap our heads around. In our role as land managers, we are always trying to maximize our impacts over large areas with the time and people that we have. To avoid getting lost in the weeds, we take an approach of science-driven adaptive land management. The basics of this process is familiar to many land managers. Identify a problem, make a plan, enact the plan, evaluate the results, and adjust as needed for next time. Here at Longwood, we engage the adaptive land management process with a scientific lens, measuring our work and reporting our findings to help the broader conservation community and using this information to inform our own future management decisions. Let's take a look at this in action. The map of plant communities that we created as part of the Ecological Baseline study gives us a detailed view of habitats on our landscape. Here we have a mix of old forests, young forests, streams, meadows, and hayfields. Using GIS mapping software, we can focus our view on the current extent of forests in the area. We can then run a buffer analysis to see how forest fragmentation affects our forest habitats. We can see here that we have a lot of edge, but very little forest interior, and even less core interior habitat. Many birds require forest interiors for nesting, where they are protected from predators such as hawks that perch in trees on the forest edge. Larger, more intact forests also provide snags and dead trees over time that become important habitat for cavity nesting birds and enrich the soils with carbon. We aim to improve and expand this dwindling habitat for these species. Now let's take a look at our streams. By running another buffer analysis, we can see that much of our stream corridor is unforested. Forested riparian buffers dramatically improve the health of our streams. Trees provide shade to keep the waters from overheating, and their roots stabilize the soil to reduce erosion. And just as we monitor our plant communities, we also monitor our watershed health. Benthic macroinvertebrates are little organisms that live on the stream bed, and they're highly sensitive to water quality. By monitoring the diversity of these organisms, we can get a snapshot of the health of the watershed, which can let us know if our stewardship practices and restoration work has had the positive impacts that we aim for. Bringing it all together, we can identify the areas of meadow and hayfield that are potential areas for future reforestation. Pulling together all of our potential future forests, we can see real improvements, a significant increase in forest interior and core habitat. Overall, this process helps us consider what direction to take our stewardship of the land, and we can use this approach with many different values and considerations. And this type of landscape scale analysis has already led to some reforestation projects. This streamside planting was an opportunity to layer in some of our ecological goals, as well as investigate ecological questions. Here we are testing experimental reforestation techniques with trees of different growth rates and levels of shade tolerance to achieve rapid canopy closure and complex structure early on in the planting. We're also testing for climate change readiness, increasing local biodiversity, and of course, protecting our watershed. Another of our reforestation projects was planned to reduce edge and increase forest interior habitat. But we have layered in other investigations as well. Specifically, we layered in 6 inches of wood chips across the whole site. It's one of those serendipitous moments when someone else in the gardens has a mountain of wood chips and we get to think up ways to use them. Here, we wanted to investigate the use of wood chips to suppress invasive species present on the site, and to see if we could more quickly build forest soils with a major layer of carbon from the wood chips, in addition to testing growth forms and shade tolerance for rapid reforestation. Now, let's take a look at another project that tackles the problem of invasive species. Before we can manage invasive species, we have to know where they are. Observing and tracking invasive species is a monumental and ever-changing effort, so we asked ourselves, how do we observe, record, and manage invasive species in a way that increases our efficiency? Can we use volunteers to help with this effort? Finding invasive species is hard, but using phenology can make it easier. We can think of phenology as nature's calendar, or recurring life cycle stages, such as spring flowering or fall leaf color. Here we see Rhodotypus scandens, or black jetweed, and Euonymus elatus, or burning bush, which are very easy to spot in ID in the fall, whereas they may be lost in a sea of green during the summer. So if we could send our volunteers out at a time when phenology makes these plants obvious and easy to identify, we hoped our volunteers could be much more effective. So we began to build a database of obvious phenological characteristics, or as we like to call it, phenobvious characteristics. Pulling citizen science data from iNaturalist, we can see the times of year when observations peak for different phenobvious traits: yellow flowering in April, purple leaves in September, and fruiting from October on. Then we engage our intrepid volunteers. Each week, we give them a list of species to search for based on what is most phenobvious at the time. We also developed mobile mapping tools that can be used in the field. Armed with these, our volunteers scout and document what they find. Meanwhile, we are also mapping our management of invasive species. We can map our work, document what different species are where, and record what kinds of effort and time we're putting into different areas. Now we can layer these multiple data sets to create maps for targeted management. If you've ever had to deal with lesser celandine in your own landscapes, you know it can get out of control quickly. This target map shows places where it has been observed in previous years, and places where it has been observed by our volunteers just this season. Then, we can map where we have gone out to manage it to make sure that we get all of our known populations. And of course, our land stewardship work is always generating more questions. Microstegium viminium, or stiltgrass, is a highly invasive annual grass that can threaten high-quality woodlands. We were using a variety of techniques in a variety of places, and we wanted to investigate management of the species more thoroughly. Most studies of this kind are 1 to 2 years in length and focus primarily on effectiveness of invasive species control. Because we are invested in long-term impacts on our own landscape, we're conducting a long-term study to examine long-term effectiveness, impacts on biodiversity, and overall effort of treatments. Stewardship science is a layered and multifaceted approach to understanding our landscape, making informed ecological decisions, and learning about the future. We're engaged in science-driven adaptive land management for continual learning and improvement. Landscapes are complex, dynamic, and ever-changing, and so is our work. And of course, with long-term ecological research, we're working on a landscape timescale. We will learn and grow and have more to share, along with the land we steward. Thank you very much.